What up, everybody? It's your boy Evan, one half of MF Pearl. We got the other half sitting behind the camera, making sure that we rolling. We got David back there.
Hey everyone.
Yes, sir. And you know what it is? Every Wednesday, Legends Only in the Building, Volume 2, live at MFHQ. Disclaimer. Live at MFHQ is in fact not recorded live and is actually a pre-recorded program. This episode contains sexually explicit content, so feel free to do what you wish with that information. If you could be so kind of like, follow, and subscribe for me. We go very long with new episodes every Wednesday. Now back to the show. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We're back at it with another one, episode 34. Make sure that you guys keep showing love to the channel. Make sure that if you guys are tuning in on YouTube, you subscribe, like the video, share it, whatever you guys can do there. You can find all of the full-length episodes of Midnight Sessions, live at MFHQ, also at mfpearl.com. But if you are finding this podcast on your favorite streaming platform, whether that be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, make sure that you guys show it some love on those platforms as well. Give it a rating, share it, save it, like it, whatever you guys can do to spread love on those platforms. We really appreciate it. But let's get back to the episode. Today's one of them freestyle introductions. Today, we have a guest who has been on quite the storytelling journey. It's dove in and it's taken its way into and through different genres through time, and it's given her the opportunity to travel because of it. It's given her the opportunity to see her hometown and other sides of the world as well in new lights, and it's helped her understand the culture that she lives within a lot more through it. Um, she has peculiar experience because she's had some time away from the city, not just any cities as well. She's moved to big cities to go ahead and pursue this industry of journalism, literature, on rapid scales. And as I went through my research, I noticed just page after page after page of articles and articles, and it wowed me to know just how much somebody can cover and just how much somebody could be researching and spreading in terms of information. And as a platform that goes ahead and is trying to accomplish something very similar in a relatable way, it's inspiring, it's curiosity striking, and today we have the opportunity to learn all about that and more. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, live at the HQ, we welcome ERIN COULEHAN.
Thank you so much for that introduction. That was so nice.
Yes, of course. Welcome.
Thank
Welcome,
you.
ERIN.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Likewise, we're very happy. We're very honored to have you here. And it's exciting. We're super excited to dive into some of the stuff maybe you don't get to talk about all the time.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Let's do it.
So I just asked right before the episode or right before we began rolling, but you had mentioned that you were born and raised here in El Paso. Today, in this world, you're very in tune. You're very involved with the communities, whether it be the arts, the music, lifestyle as a whole. But prior to your career beginning and prior to you advancing through this, would you say you were always in tune with the city?
I think I always tried to be. I learned how to read at a really young age, and so that was something that I always loved. I always say that kindergarten was the best year of my life because, for one, I learned how to read, and for two, my little sister was born, so I got to come home from school every day and read to her.
Oh, nice.
So I thought, my life is made. It doesn't get much better than that. But it did, luckily. I'm a third generation journalist. My dad studied journalism at UTEP. He covered sports. He got to interview Don Haskins a bunch. And then my grandmother traveled as a journalist. She was married to, of course, my grandfather, and he was a spy in the OSS and later the CIA.
Whoa.
So they lived all over the world, and she would write for whatever magazine or newspaper in the city that they were in. And when they retired in El Paso, she became the editor of the aviation section of the El Paso Herald. So she was the first woman in Texas to get her pilot's license, the first woman editor of this section of journalism in El Paso. And I think it's just been in my blood to want to tell these kinds of stories. And I have a huge folder of clips of hers from when she was in college up until the 90s to right before she passed away. And it's so neat to see clips from El Paso when she's covering immigration, and decades later, I'm covering the same thing, which is, really full circle and really kind of interesting that, you know, we've come so far as a culture, but really we haven't really taken that many big steps forward.
Yeah, I saw a bit of an interview about 5 years ago that you had done with the city as well, and you had mentioned that your time in Germany
Yeah.
had kind of showed you just like how our issues translate across the world, for better or worse, of course, like the things that go on, and you were also saying how history repeats itself as well.
Oh, totally. So
Is
when
by the way, five. This was 5 years ago. Is
yeah.
this still ringing very true right now in like your
Yes.
interests and like your focuses?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm so glad we get to talk about this. That was one of the most pivotal experiences of my life that
Yeah.
luckily I was able to do twice. When I was working on my master's in literature at UTEP, I was taking Holocaust literature and film classes. Um, to backtrack, I had gotten my minor in that in college. So I was really familiar with the professor. We had studied in New York together. And so he asked me if I wanted to help put together a study abroad course for graduate students that would go to Germany and Poland while he was researching his book that he was working on. I said, absolutely. So,
You helped with the book as well, right? That's why you had to get the.
yes, and I mean, it was a really good opportunity. I'm very
Yeah.
easily bribed. You know, I'll write if I get to travel and learn some history. But so we went in the middle of winter. We started in Berlin and we retraced the Nazi steps from the original spot. It's this beautiful villa called Sachsenhausen where they signed the papers like, let's do this. We went to the first Nazi torture chamber that was in the basement of a building where they took people who were like librarians. There was one librarian who was arrested and tortured because she said she had more sense in her ass than Hitler in his head, which of course you can't say.
Yeah.
Um,
That'll get you in trouble.
yeah, oh, absolutely. And so then we went to the very first concentration camp, which, you know, I will always remember it has these giant iron gates that because of rust and decay, they smell like blood at the entrance, and it's just something that stuck with me. And from there we traveled to Poland. We got to see Warsaw and the devastation that occurred there, and then went to Krakow, which was the only city in Poland that was untouched by Nazism because it was going to be Hitler's monument to the defeated Jews. So it looks like the movie Anastasia. If you ever saw that animated film, it's absolutely beautiful.
It's a really good movie.
Yeah, really, really good. And then we traveled to the city, or it's more like a village, Auschwitz, which is where Auschwitz was. And so it was right across from where we were staying, and none of us could sleep because we were staying in like a hostels or like dorm style living. That was the exact same make and model as the bunks that we were researching in Auschwitz. You know, and
Chills the whole time, uncomfortable.
oh, absolutely. And then we had the opportunity to do scholar tours. So they gave us access that people don't get access to. And so we were trekking, you know, off the path with snow up to our knees, you know, miserable. And, you know, we had slept, we were clothed, we were fed, we were healthy, we were, you know, we're not suffering whatsoever. And then just realizing the magnitude of where we were, and then seeing that across from the gas chamber was a bar where, you know, the soldiers would go have their happy hour and watch the smokestacks before they went home to their wives and their family.
Yeah.
And that was something that I was just like, oh my God, this is horrible. So through that, we worked through the Museum of Jewish Heritage in New York City. And so the next year, I returned to do the class again as a TA. And because of my experience with that and my connections with the museum, once family separation started under Donald Trump, I was like, oh my God, this is really, really similar to the policies I've been studying in graduate school and I've been talking to people about, to Holocaust survivors. So I pitched a story to Glamour magazine about interviewing a survivor about her experience with it from Poland, who is in New York, and they allowed me to do it. And something that will always stick with me is her telling me, like, we cannot let this happen again. I've seen it. It happened to my cousin Joshua.
The survivor that you're interviewing.
And then it was one of those moments where it's like, this is my job. Like, you know, it's leading up to, something horrible happened to Joshua, and it's my job to ask, you know, and, to have her relive that. But she was lovely and gracious and told the story beautifully. And it was something that people read and they responded to. And, I hate that it's something that is still resonating with people and something that families are still suffering through. But I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to tell these stories to people.
Oh yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, having to like ask the hard questions and everything. Would you say, in any sort of way, this moment would you consider it a shift in only like your career trajectory, or did it have any shifts in like the way you moved personally as well?
I think both. I think definitely my interest in history and my love of literature for the first time had really intersected with my career as a journalist, whereas it hadn't before.
Okay.
I was covering entertainment, culture, you're doing more kind of op ed stuff, whereas this was more like high academic reporting, history, research, like very data driven.
Did you feel uncomfortable at first doing it, or was there like a natural feel regardless, despite it being like a shift in the subject matter?
I felt like I was the right person to do it because I had so much experience before in taking Holocaust literature and film classes. I used to volunteer with the Jewish Federation here, and I have an amazing mentor who I run through everything. Like, okay, am I doing this right? How do I make it better?
Hmm. With literature as your bachelor's,
Hmm.
being having the journalist in you, it being a multi-generational career, uh, can you help me understand why choose literature over journalism for throughout the bachelor's chapter of your education?
Like I said, I'm easily bribed.
Okay.
So I started as a microbiology major at UTEP because I wanted to be a surgeon. I knew that I wanted to help people. I thought it was so cool. I loved Grey's Anatomy. I grew up, watching my mom. My mom was a DMP, so she's a doctor of nurse practitioner,
Okay.
but she would come home during like her surgery units in school, chop up a rotisserie chicken or like raw chicken and hot dogs and teach me and my sister how to sew them back together, while she was working on
Whoa.
sutures, and stitches and stuff. So, my poor dad would come home and think we're having this great roast chicken meal, but it's just, our science projects. Sorry.
Sweet.
So I always loved that. And then my first semester at UTEP, I had to take an introduction to British Lit class, and I wrote a paper on King Lear that my professor showed to the chair at the time, and he wrote me a letter, like an actual like type letter, like very official.
Stamp.
Yeah, that she delivered, like gave to me. I thought it was like a howler from Harry Potter. Can you meet me to discuss this King Lear paper? And so I thought, oh no, he thinks I plagiarized. And I was just like, great, I'm gonna have to.
Chat GPT'd it.
Yeah, yeah, right, 2007. So that I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to explain to him this paper. I thought it was good.
Yeah.
And so then I go in with all my research, like guns blazing, like I'm not gonna get kicked out of college for this. And he kind of looks at me real confused. He's like, no, I love the paper. He's like, I'm taking a group of students to London over the summer to study at Shakespeare's Globe. Do you want to come? And I was like, yeah, where do I sign? And so it was, the best decision I've ever made. I got to spend every summer in London studying Shakespearean theater, going to plays at the West End, going to Paris on the weekends and meeting friends, and really kind of realizing what I would describe as writing about literature with a pulse, going to see actors like David Tennant and Catherine Tate, in Much Ado About Nothing, and why that matters. Seeing plays like Ruined, which is about female genital mutilation in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and why that's important in terms of theater and social justice and drama. So it was something that was just really natural to me. And then also in college, I was encouraged to do the Bill Archer Fellowship, which is through the UT system. So they pick some of the top students from every campus. My semester, UTEP only had 2 because no one knew about it. But you go and live in DC for a semester, and you do internships during the day, and then you take classes at night. So I went, and not only was I only one of 2 UTEP students, I was the only English major, and everyone who I lived with was studying politics and economics at UT Austin, or, foreign relations and business affairs at UT Dallas, like really big stuff. And I was studying, literature and humanities in El Paso because I like going to London. And so that was something where I thought, like, okay, teach yourself, like learn why this is important. And so I interned at Washington Life magazine, which is like the city magazine here, like Vanity Fair in New York City, which was so much fun. I got to learn how magazines worked. I got to cover my first concert, which was Kate Nash at the 930 Club. And that opened my eyes like, oh my gosh, I can use all of this book knowledge and all of this history and everything that I've studied and these experiences and talk to, creatives who are doing what I enjoy studying. So I came back, graduated, and then my best friend's mom was coming back to El Paso to start the city magazine.
Boom. That's how it happens. So that's where the time with the city begins. What you just described is this also is the blend from literature into journalism as well, right? You don't spend, I believe, too much time originally here before you're already off to DC, though, correct?
Let's see.
Like when you from beginning with the city magazine to
Oh, yeah, it was like probably less than a year because I had graduated and I love the magazine and I decided, okay, I'm going to go from intern to editor. I was like 22, whatever. And Shelly's like, absolutely not. Like, you need to go get some life experience. Like, fine. I had already.
What a great piece of advice.
Yeah,
What a selfless
right?
piece of advice.
Oh, definitely. Thank God.
Most people want to, like,
Yeah, no, she like
their
pushed
stars
me. Yeah.
and like that.
Oh, totally. And so my parents had been encouraging me to go to graduate school. And so I knew I really wanted to do journalism. And so I thought, okay, maybe Columbia, but it was such a big school. I was like, I'm going to get lost. And I had, lived in DC before, still had tons of contacts there. I love that Georgetown was a smaller program. And so I applied and I got in and was, again, taking classes at night. So during the day, I was interning at National Geographic Television in the special section. So all of like the animal documentaries or, the longer form, like Inside Combat Rescue I got to work on, which is just incredible. I love that experience.
Yeah. Wow. You're correcting me then, because on my first assumption was that I thought Georgetown was I mean, not to say it's not, but the way you're describing it, but I was assuming it was such a large, big university experience, and despite it being a smaller program, you're still within a huge, huge city. So this might be a fast track question, which might be suited later, but forget it. We're doing it now.
Okay.
Being over there and getting exposed to the rapid pace, not only with Georgetown, not only with this is also like tabled a little later, but all of the big publications that you're working with as well. Kind of like now today, I don't want to say in a down sort of way, but El Paso isn't necessarily as rapid paced as a big city. So I guess having all that experience, which I would like to dive into throughout the rest of the conversation, coming back, what is that slowdown period like for you? What is that like?
It was so, just bizarre for me when I went back to DC for graduate school. Thank God I had done the fellowship. Otherwise, I don't think I would have had the guts to do it. I developed a lot of confidence during that time in undergrad in DC. For being in El Paso, I remember, it was a group of 32 students, we're all the best of the best from our schools. Everyone's type A, everyone's like super special, And me and the other El Pasoan were like, gosh, these people are so serious. Like, we're not in competition with each other. Like, you're working at the White House, I'm here, I'm there, So we went to this Mexican restaurant on Capitol Hill, and she and I like put our money together and talked to the bartender, and we're like, can you just get like everyone a shot of tequila, like, and just like break the ice? And so and people still talk about it to this day, that first shot, round of tequila that made people feel welcomed and, safe and like everything's going to be okay. And that's something that I think people really admire about El Paso is that we like to make people feel comfortable and put them at ease.
Yeah.
So when I moved back to DC to go to graduate school, luckily I had friends who were already from El Paso living in DC, friends from Texas living in DC, and I thought, okay, like socially I'll be fine. Academically, I was completely, well, not completely because I got in. I felt out of my league because so many of my classmates were like pedigreed, they come from like East Coast money and they have houses in the Hamptons and Nantucket and knew how to behave at dinner parties sort of thing. And I'm like, what do you mean you never went to Mexico in high school or like desert parties?
Yeah.
Like
In the set.
yeah, exactly. And so to me, I thought they were so, glamorous and like put together. And they thought I was just like the wildest, most exotic thing they had ever seen, like this little firecracker from this weird little town in Texas that turned out to, years later be the center of our political world.
How do you define that? What does that mean? What do you mean by that?
Gosh, I remember when I was in DC, and for example, it was Beto O'Rourke's first term. And so he was, a new congressman. People were kind of familiar with him, people kind of familiar with El Paso, it's still described as like a city in the dirt, or, bands would say, oh, yeah, we stopped there in between LA and Phoenix. And it's like, no, like
Yeah.
we're a real place. It's not like, Kill Bill, we're riding horses everywhere. And then, fast forward to immigration, to COVID, to social justice issues, to women's rights. Everything was happening in El Paso. August 3rd.
Yeah.
From August 3rd, 2019, up until COVID recovery was a really, really hard time in this community and in this country. And I think we kind of became the canary in the coal mine for that struggles. How awful it was when inmates were transporting the dead bodies at UMC. And that became international news of how bad things were for communities like ours.
Yeah, we've been in the spotlight for a few different things that we probably want to take back.
Right?
Um,
I always say, it's never good news when the New York Times calls me and I'm like, oh no, what happened now?
with being in DC, you were able to join in on some big publications. One of the ones that I like to focus on, of course, is Rolling Stone.
Yeah.
During your time there, you're writing, and I was trying to go through I wanted to find the end. I couldn't find it. I don't know how many
Oh, I like
pages.
that. Hopefully.
I didn't know where the end was. I
To
was
be continued.
Yeah, for real. But there's a range of articles in there, and then I started to find your articles of different publications, and I saw how they go. I think Teen Vogue
Yeah.
was where you really got into social justice.
Mm-hmm.
But through Rolling Stone first, when you're writing these articles, some of them are a little bit more just like a quick fact update. Some of them are, this artist just said, we're talking 2013 Eminem here. We're talking when
I know.
Atlanta is first getting introduced to FX, and
Oh,
everybody's
yeah.
like, oh,
Blurred
God,
lines.
Yeah.
That was a big one.
As you're going through this, like, what kind of system did you have in place? This is coming from a place right now of just like, we have similar interests in wanting to just try to document as much as we possibly can. What systems did you have in place to just try to keep up with all that? How much of that was stuff that you were genuinely into, and how much of it was stuff that were like, I do have a job to do also. I gotta be and tapped into these genres of music or movies that they might not really be my cup of tea.
That's a really good question. I got so lucky, and I think about this a lot, and often in careers, you'll hear like, oh, it's who you know, it's who you know. It's who knows you. And it's all about being right place, right time. And with Rolling Stone, it wasn't my dream job. Like, who wants their dream job, right out, like fresh out the gate? No, it was my dream start, which is so much more important. And so I had this amazing opportunity because of a class at Georgetown. On the first day of school, everyone stands up and says like who they are, where they're from, what they want to do. Everyone in my class wanted to do like politics, for C-SPAN, or like sports reporting for ESPN, and I'm like, I want to write about music for Elle magazine, for the women's glossies, like that's all I want to do. And so then I get a tap on my shoulder, and it's a classmate. He's like, hey, I have a music blog. It's called DC Music Live. I need someone to cover indie rock and roll. Do you want to do it? And I'm like, well, how? He's like, you just go to the shows, like, we'll set it up. I was like, yeah, no idea. He was like, okay, I'll figure it out. I had the great opportunity when I was here to be really close with the people involved with Neon Desert and Bowie Feathers and Tricky Falls. So I was very, very comfortable around musicians, loved music. And so I started covering these shows like 4 or 5 nights a week, for free. Which, I mean, I would get to go to the 9:30 Club and hang out with bands and do all sorts of really cool interviews and features because there was no other outlet like that in DC. So I got to spend like Valentine's Day with Mumford and Sons. I was talking with Marcus Mumford. I was like, I love Carrie Mulligan, and he's like, me too. And so from there, I developed, friendships with a bunch of the touring bands. And one of them had come to DC and we're going to New York the next night with this little band who had just started called Imagine Dragons. And so they asked me if I wanted to go to the New York show because they didn't think anyone was going to show up. I was like,
Wow.
yeah, I'll go. The band is Atlas Genius. They're still very, very good friends of mine. And so I went and I was the only girl backstage and, just kind of waiting by myself. And then I saw another girl backstage and she was at the cupcake table. And I was like, oh, thank God, there's my in. So then she and I became friends and she was taking pictures. And so we got to talking, and she's like, oh, I'm a photo editor. It's like, oh, I covered, music in DC. And turns out she's a photo editor at Rolling Stone. I was like, oh, yeah, I think I've heard of that magazine. So we developed this really great friendship. She's still one of my best friends to this day. And we would help each other out. So if a band was coming to DC first, I would say, hey, when you're in New York, look out for the tall redhead. That's my friend Tracy. Like, let her get a shot. Same thing. When she would get the bands first, like, hey, make sure you talk to Erin from DC Music Live. So it was really nice having that kind of sisterhood, and just, a partner who not only loved the music, but kind of understood the challenges that we would face. And so it was like probably March or April of 2013, and my mom was making plans for the summer, like, okay, you're going to come back to El Paso, you need to get a job. Like, oh, I don't really want to come back to El Paso for the summer. And so Tracy had told me, my friend at Rolling Stone, hey, send me some clips because we're going to need a new news writer. I was like, okay. Didn't hear anything back. And I'm just like, whatever. And then I didn't hear nothing the rest of the semester. Came back here. And I was actually at the City Magazine visiting Shelley when I got an email from an editor at Rolling Stone. And they're like, hey, can you start the Tuesday after Memorial Day? And I was like, what? So like, what do you want me to do? And I'm like, I'm in El Paso. And this was when remote work was not a thing. And so as a news writer, I would be covering breaking news for music, television, and film as it happened. So we would get a lot of press releases. It would be things like recapping performances on The Tonight Show, things like that. But because I was working from El Paso, my shift started at 5 a.m. So I was working 5 a.m. to 2 p.m. on an East Coast schedule. All of my friends were, waking up as I'm like ready to go to bed and, just hustling. And the pay was like absolutely astonishing, which is why I had to get so many stories out because, I had make rent in DC and, and down here, live down here. So I had a goal of writing 8 to 12 stories a day in order to meet a certain quota.
That's why there's so many pages.
Yeah. And just like boom, 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 boom. I covered the death and the funeral of James Gandolfini, Game of Thrones. Speaking of things that I didn't watch, I really had a taste where I had to cover Game of Thrones and like the Red Wedding, and people were really into it. And I was like, why do I have to cover this? Something else I covered was the MTV Video Music Awards when Robin Thicke and Miley Cyrus had that very risque performance. And, I had to cover every single performance at that event. And so it was probably like 15 minutes in between performances that I have to be like, okay, what just happened? And how do I like digest this enough to put online for people to feel like they were there too? So through that, I developed a really, really strong work ethic and then thinking fast. Okay, this is how you get this story. This is what people need to know. And then they let me go to music festivals like Made in America, which
Oh
was
yeah.
just so much fun. I look back on that so fondly, and it was great. But then, I was also in graduate school.
Oh my
And so
gosh. Yeah, for real.
working on a thesis and also still covering shows. And it was so much. And, I loved what I did and I kept my head down, did good work. But, ultimately, my goal as a reporter or as a writer, as a storyteller isn't, what Drake did today or, Katy Perry's music video just dropped. I want to interview people. I want to get, inside their heads and under their skins and tell their stories. And so from the experience with Rolling Stone, I was able to use my portfolio to go to other editors, for example, at Elle, say, hey, I've been doing this. Can I do this for you? And I was lucky enough that, the door was open.
The thing that you had said in the class.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. And it was within like a year, manifest it,
Yeah, for sure.
or it's like knowing the avenues of how to get there and not being afraid. I always thought like, oh my gosh, who am I, to write this story or to think I could be one of those L writers that, I grew up reading magazines. I love reading magazines. I still do it. I would just fawn over, the essays and the pictures and, that lifestyle of being able to like meet people and then tell people about meeting people is just so
Yeah, for
interesting
sure.
to me.
Um, when we think about artists that we would love to have featured on Midnight, or when we think about guests that we would love to interview, we call them white whales.
Yeah.
Like, have you had the opportunity to, speak with a couple of your own, or would you say, humbly, you're still chasing them? Like, what experiences have you been able to have with like some of your dream guests or dream interviewees? Yeah. What can you say to that?
Oh gosh, all of it feels so much like a fairy tale.
Okay.
Just thinking about growing up and my sister and I listening to Sirius XM, Alt Nation, driving to Starbucks.
Alt Nation.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
we liked.
I've heard of it.
Oh yeah, that's where we got all of our indie music, and hearing these songs where both of us would be like, shut up, who's this band? Who's this band? And, having those moments where you pause and you're like, oh, holy shit, that's a great song. Or, wow, I've never heard anything like that before. And then months later, I got to meet those people and tell them, when you play this, or this gave me goosebumps, or I love this reference to literature that I think you did there. Like, when did you read this book? Why did you put it into your music? That sort of stuff is really, really great, And then if you get someone who at the end thanks you or says, oh, no, it's okay, or tells a PR, like, let them go on a little bit longer. Like, yes, I did it. Or if they cry, of course, but I try not to make people cry too much these days. But yeah, and it's so neat. I'm pretty good around like musicians. I don't fangirl or anything. Writers, on the other hand, I'm like Porky Pig, like, like cannot.
Yeah.
I
Well, was the comfort with musicians? Oh well. Okay, let's go back to Tricky Falls.
Oh, yeah.
Like, was the comfort developed there, or do you think you like from the very first musician you've just had this natural?
I think I've always kind of just been drawn to it. I remember, like I said, I learned how to read really
Yeah.
young, and so by fifth grade, I had a college level like reading.
Yeah.
And so I was bored. I was really, really bored a lot, in fifth grade. I'm like, okay. And then I got into music. It's like, hey, this is kind of like poetry. And so this was during the time of like TRL and pop music. And so, oh my gosh, this is so nerdy. I would keep journals, okay, these are the top 10 on TRL, Monday, Tuesday, whatever. And then on the weekends, watch the VH1 top 20 countdown and kind of cross reference and see, okay,
yeah, I've seen
this is
some of those,
what MTV is doing. This is what VH1 is doing. And I loved it. Like, I remember my mom would let me.
Sorry, sir, not to interrupt. Would you see the different lists and like cross?
Yeah,
which ones are-
absolutely.
Okay.
I could see like, okay, Dave Matthews Band has been number one for Crash Into Me for weeks on VH1, but it's not yet once been on TRL. Or you'd have NSYNC kind of at the bottom of the charts, and then later, pop would kind of crawl up, which I thought was so cool. And then my mom would use it as an incentive. Like if I did well in school, I could, miss that afternoon to watch, the Bye 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 premiere on TRL or,
I remember that
Colin
one.
Carson. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I loved it and I thought it was so interesting. But, no one tells you that you can grow up and be a music journalist. Like, that wasn't a thing. It's like be a doctor, be a lawyer. But I loved music so much that it was just something that I was drawn to. And then when I was in high school, it was me and like the wrestling team listening to like Fall Out Boy.
Yeah.
And, bands like that are going to Warped Tour and,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
really loving music that wasn't, what everyone else in high school
Mhm.
was listening to. And then through Tricky Falls, I was really good friends with, the Royalty and the Lusitania. So we would talk about music all the time. I would go to shows with them. Most of them worked at Tricky Falls and Bowie Feathers, so I would get to hang out during sound checks, or kind of, just like meet the bands and, get comfortable, see them as
Yeah.
people. It's like, what's it like on the road? And I think that really helped me, kind of get a sense of like who they are, like as people rather than like,
Yeah.
oh, that's that person on stage who I think I know.
Yeah, growing up with the time as you're describing, what was your impression like as like NSYNC is getting big, Britney Spears getting big, but then you have this guy just coming in and crashing into it all with Eminem. Like, what is your
Yeah,
yeah?
I remember distinctly when Eminem and Korn started being played on TRL, and my parents were like, "Ooh, this isn't, this
Man,
isn't the
yeah.
Backstreet Boys," or it was when Blink 182 was coming up to. I loved Blink 182, but I wasn't allowed to listen to them because they were like naked in the music video, or But from there, I was like drawn to punk rock and kind of like these like
Mhm.
loud guitars and like wild adventures that I thought was just like
Yeah,
so romantic and just like
yeah.
everything. And then seeing the movie, Almost Famous and things like that, and
Mhm.
wanting to be not Penny Lane, of course, but the reporter. I was like, wait, I could go on tour with a band and just like talk
And just
about what
ask questions. Yeah,
happens.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like oh my god, amazing! Sign me up.
With uh interviews,
Yeah.
when you're interviewing, whether they're a musician, a writer, or they're a creator of some other sort, or any other sort of public figure, uh, what's your approach to an
Mhm.
interview? Like, of course, it might be different based on like the goal in mind. Are you covering somebody's new album? Are you covering
Mhm.
a social issue? But is there like a universal principle that you're applying to every conversation you have with a guest or an interviewee?
They can smell fear. No. No, but you want to go into it. I think about like I'm the professional in this situation. It's my job to make sure they feel comfortable talking to me. I'm going to be asking them questions that no one asks them. They probably don't want to talk about it depending on the story, but I'm there to help make them feel comfortable telling their truth in a non-judgmental way. It's different. I'll always remember it was my first story for Elle. They sent me to LA to interview this band who had just gotten nominated for like album of the year, this indie band, which is a huge, huge deal. So I set it up with the publicist and stuff. We were at this super cool party atop the W in LA. Like Joan Jett had just gone on and done this like secret surprise performance. Finally wrangled the guy. And I'm like, okay, hey, I'm here, for Elle. And he kind of like shrugs and he's like, oh, are you going to talk to me about my hair care? And I'm like, dude, like, immediately then I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to like match him, either kind of like make him laugh or let him know, like, you're not going to intimidate me.
Hmm.
So I was like, dude, you think you're the best I could get for hair care for a women's magazine? Like, come on, we're here to talk about you, you and your music. So then I asked him about, what's it like being nominated for Album of the Year for this Grammy. He's like, well, it doesn't really matter. And I'm like, what? He's like, shit like that doesn't matter to me. And I'm like, I traveled all of this way. And I'm like, no. And so I just kind of, broke the fourth wall and it's like, hey, man, I don't want to make you look like an asshole, but you're not really giving me very much here. Like, you don't care about awards or recognition or, the Grammys. That's fine. But what is it that you do care about? Like, what's something that stops you and makes you think, like, wow, I did something really badass? So then he told me this really lovely story about being stopped in the streets of Brooklyn by a woman who showed him the inside of her engagement ring, which was inscribed with some of his lyrics.
Damn.
I'm like, that's it. Like, that's what people want. You know, you can't just say, like, well, it doesn't matter to me, because it should matter, because it matters to a bunch of people who really look up to you and really, admire you. Other times, news wise, I've had to, interview politicians about things that weren't comfortable
Yeah.
for them. For instance, the former DA, Rosales, Yvonne Rosales, when all of that was going down. And, it's not nice questions, but there are people's lives on the line. There's, policies and taxpayer dollars at stake. And, we're entrusted as journalists to be watchdogs for the community. And something that we're taught in journalism school is that we have to be, that it's our role to comfort the afflicted and to afflict the comfortable in some cases, which I love because, again, we're after the truth.
Yeah. Oh. Would it be a repetitive question to ask you if there's been any sort of like exercises that have helped you overcome that fear? Like, not so much fear, but like, is there any skill building exercises to be able to ask those tough questions?
I mean, I think being really confident in your reporting and doing research, and then being good at communicating.
Don't ever try to freestyle it. Research.
Yeah. Oh no. You don't want to go in blind, and you don't want to insult someone, because oftentimes people are going to go in there guarded. Which of course it's our job to dig out the truth. And one of my favorite questions to ask people that they really appreciate is, what is it that people get wrong about you? Everyone has been misinterpreted, misunderstood, and would love to set the record straight. And it makes you look like a hero for being able to set the record straight for them. And then you get an exclusive, about it.
Being at the city, let's just have that be a segue into the city. At the City magazine, your time there, you've been climbing up the ranks, becoming the senior editor, I believe. And what is it in that role, aside from the articles that you publish that are written by you? How would you describe like your role within the city today? And like a part B, what are your personal missions to accomplish within the city?
Ooh, these are good questions. My role as the senior editor is to be behind the scenes and ahead of the curve as much as I can. So, for instance, we're already planning our Best of the City for January 18th. We're doing voting right now for the best of everything. We're planning a massive event. There's going to be tons of people, so much logistics. And then we also have 4 publications in development and production. Yeah, all of them. So I operate off of Google spreadsheets and checklists.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And then just know, your ducks have to be in a row. And my job is so much fun because I get to meet people and I get to not decide, but I get to help amplify, these stories that get told. And my favorite part about the magazine is we only celebrate the good things that are going on in the community. So for one, you're never going to hear bad news or anything negative, which, is just not the case in almost any other form of media. And then it's nice to know that there is positivity in this world, and then especially in this community. And so whether it be a food truck run by veterans and their in-laws, or, Linda Wolf, Khalid's mom, who runs this amazing nonprofit and has had an extraordinary life, but has been, that's Khalid's mom, and is stepping out into her own identity. It's really, really inspiring for me to help really showcase what makes this community so special. And then I get to help foster the next generation. We have inquiries all the time for internships, for photographers, for writers, and that's something that I absolutely love. I call them my editorial army. They come in every Monday and they help me with social media. They help me with prospecting for sales leads and stories. They help me with content and interviews and photo shoots, and their work is so good, and it's so neat to help be a part of that community, because I didn't have that when I was their age, because it didn't exist yet.
So we're here today, and it's in no way am I trying to be pessimistic, but I do want to explore like my curiosity as to what are the challenges that you have to overcome today in a world where some people might ask like who's still reading a magazine? Like what are those challenges that you've had to overcome? What are some I'd assume the biggest transition has been trying to become more of a subscription based online, but are there other stuff that we might not see on the day-to-day operating this
Yeah.
that you're aware all this stuff is starting to kind of like make its way out of society, but this is the value still there? How do we translate it? Like what's been that puzzle for you throughout these last couple years? How long of this
Three
period has been?
years as of last week, which is
Okay, for
crazy.
sure.
And
Oh, okay. Congratulations on 3 years then.
thanks. It's like something like 50 covers, because we have the lifestyle magazine and then home and design and visitor's guide, and then like millions of words, thousands of photos, too many parties,
Yeah,
and so much
seriously.
more to come, which is just great. What before, when I was in broadcast news, what I didn't like was that my stories, the slate was wiped clean every day. I could work really, really hard, and I was just on one of 5 stories all day for broadcast, for instance, and then the next day, okay, what's the next tragedy? What's the next, hit? What's the next thing that's going to get people's attention? Which, is not fun. Versus what I like to describe with the magazine and the psychological impact of like picking up something, reading it from left to right, and like that feeling of accomplishment of making progress, rather than like mindlessly doom scrolling on your phone and there's no end to the misery. And so that is really fun for me. And then understanding what our readership and our market is. People want to see themselves, at an event that they got really dressed up for, or at a concert that they saved up a lot of money to attend, or, a super cool restaurant that is having its, grand opening. Like that kind of stuff is important. And that is why we tell these stories. It's about lifestyle. It's not about, the bloodiest or the most glamorous or the most salacious thing we can find. It's about what makes this city operate and what makes people stay here. And so, you'll hear things like print is dead. No, it's not. It's like, the attitude has become, I think, kind of apathetic towards print. And think about books. People said that with Amazon, all the bookstores were going to go away. They haven't.
No,
They said that everything was going to go to digital. I have 3 books in my purse right now. I will never read a book on a phone or any sort of device. Like it's all about evolution, the same way that people say that AI is going to take over. If you have spell check or predicted text, you've been using AI forever. It's about integrating technology with the market and understanding why our product, which it is still valuable. People keep these magazines on their coffee tables because they're beautiful. And it's nice when they have people come over or people visit and they say, oh, okay, we're in El Paso. Like, what's there to do? Look at this beautiful magazine. Like, did you know that we had this amazing person who is the hairstylist for Florence Pugh and Anne Hathaway and Nicole Kidman, and her husband is on the show The Chosen, and they split their time between El Paso and Hollywood? Oh, you didn't know that? You thought El Paso was just this little like town in the dirt? Like, you're the one that's misinformed, not me.
Yeah, for sure. As if El Paso, because El Paso is a very locally driven city, but places such as in LA or New York, a lot of the talent and everything just travels through it, and it's just like moments. Do you think that the city? Well, I mean, it's titled The City Magazine. I feel like it would always retain that locally driven nature, but if we slowly dove into a more globally driven city,
Yeah.
do you think the city would evolve with that, or do you think it would try to keep its roots? Like,
That's actually something that's been my dream. We have this the City Spaces, which is our home and design magazine that celebrates, beautiful architecture, like Architectural Digest. I love that magazine, but I would love to have a third magazine that we would call the City Places, where we would go visit people with amazing homes in LA, or, people who have resorts in Mexico or villas in Italy, or who go on really extraordinary vacations. I think that would be so neat to showcase El Paso's global impact and, the reach that we're going.
would that be so? You would try to find guests that are from here but are doing things around.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, I get what you're saying. Now.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, that's important because I think that it's I don't know. I mean, it's easy to see people leave, and I've seen and I don't know if I've ever been at fault at it for complaining about somebody necessarily leaving to go chase more opportunity, but I do feel as if like the value for El Paso, like a lot of that gets lost because it's really hard to like see where that benefits us as a city. Um, but as you tell the stories, one of the things that I've heard as a creator, as somebody who makes, if you make music, if you paint, if you write or anything like that, one of the biggest like rules of thumbs that I've heard is would you read it yourself? You know what I mean? And that's one of the biggest things to gauge when you're, editing and when you're approving every article, what sort of evaluations are you going through to see if it's like not worth, if it's up to the city's standard that's being set by everyone on the team?
Definitely. I have to be excited about it.
Okay.
Of course, and we're so lucky that we waste no pages, like no words, no pages, no ink, because we have to maintain a very specific ratio of ads to editorial. Otherwise, we get in trouble from the magazine association we're in. So everything, of course, matters. And so with the stories that I write, I want to make sure that people are going to love the community and love the story as much as I do. And if people don't like it, it's not because it's not a good story. It's because I failed as a writer to portray why it's so important. And so it's neat to kind of see what is like important to me or still gives me goosebumps. For a really long time, I couldn't write about music just because I had done so for so long. And I was just like, I don't care about a band, I don't care about a song or, whatever. And then it took me almost, I guess, like 10 years to really be excited about a concert or music or experience again. And that's something I never want to lose ever again.
I want to ask the question that you said you always like to ask too. So with the city, do you think there are any misconceptions about the publication at all, or just anything in general regarding the city? Like, do you guys ever receive any sorts of, like, maybe not just towards you guys, but towards like print in general with print being dead? But do you guys ever feel like you've received any criticism that you'd like to, what's the word? Address?
I mean, not really. Of course, people are always going to have their opinions. And when people tell me, well, print is dead, da, 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 I'm like, and how do you know? Like, I have been in this industry for 10 years. I've been successful in this industry for more than 10 years. And I have a better understanding of it. I'm not concerned if you have any sort of information that I'm not privy to, by all means. But I often wonder if this happens in other industries or other offices. Me and my graphic designer laugh about, like, we have actually a tally on my dry erase board, the amount of times we're told how to do our jobs, like over the course of an issue, whether it be like, we'll Photoshop this truck that's, this model of a truck into a Harley motorcycle. And I'm like, no, this is like physics. Like, I can't.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to ask my graphic designer to do that, or things that are not like, at the time, like editorial value. I have to think about, maintaining a balance for our very, very broad readership. Our readership is from 18 years old to 76 years old. That's huge. Making sure that there's something for everybody and that we don't cater to the West Side or to downtown, and that we have, inclusion in terms of like Socorro and Canutillo and diversity of stories.
Yeah.
And so that's something that we are very, very mindful of, is to make sure that everyone has a seat at the table, because it's true. We love this city so much, and there's always something new and exciting. And I think people like to say that there's nothing to do in El Paso. Anyone can say that is welcome to spend a week with me, because I am never bored. I wish I had the opportunity to be bored. And there's so much to celebrate. El Paso is an absolutely wonderful place, and the magazine is in such a wonderful position to really help celebrate that on a huge level, which is, through the longevity of print.
I think that was important. What you said is that everyone gets a seat at the table. But I don't think that, everybody is given that handout. I do think that there's a sense of like you do have to earn a bit of your seat at the table. Is there any advice that you would be able to share, like, what is the process like when you either have to say no or turn down a possible article? Like, I'm sure people submit, and then I'm sure you also reach out.
Mm-hmm.
So what's that process like when you do have to say no? Like, what are you looking for from these people?
Mm-hmm.
For them to kind of like understand, like, yes, everyone's welcome, but at the same time, like if we just accepted everything, like,
Yeah.
you get what I'm trying to say?
Totally. Yeah, there's definitely, it's hard because who am I to say a story's not important? That doesn't, just because it's not published in this issue or right now doesn't mean we never will. I explained, we have limits of space and we have a very strict, editorial calendar with themes. And so I can't stray too far from a theme. Otherwise, why have a theme?
Yeah.
And so I take into account a lot of things, especially I said we don't, report on bad news. So with every story that's pitched to us, we do kind of a little background check. Has the CEO of this, nonprofit that just got an award, did he just get a DUI? Is this person going through a very public divorce and probably doesn't want any media attention on them, which is where lifestyle really differs from news. Publish, get the story out. Whereas, we have people's lives that we're writing about. It's their lifestyles. And so just because the story isn't, right now doesn't mean not ever. There's just, we don't ever want to like serve something that's undercooked,
Yeah, for sure. Still a little raw. Mm-hmm. My other question I had floating around was when you were talking about somebody kind of like having like revisions on this graphic design or something that might be a little bit ridiculous. In these scenarios, when you have a lot of back and forth, has there ever been this is a quick answer to lead into a little bit more of an elaborated question, but has there ever been situations where like the person that the article's about is unsatisfied?
I try to avoid that. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I'm really good at before we even lay out the editorial, I'll send them fact checking items and quotes. So it's a bulleted list of like, here's what you said. Did you go to UTEP in 1993? That kind of stuff, just so that they have a heads up of what's going to be published. I think people always have this fear that there's going to be something like horrible printed about them, which, I have the nightmare that the magazine will be printed upside down. Like, I get it. So I try to really make sure that people feel like they have not only a voice in the story because it's their story, but, a set of eyes and that they can see what is going to happen. Sometimes people say, why did you not quote me more? Again, it's for space. Like I have to weigh editorial and news value with, ad sizes and things like that. It's never anything that like, oh, I hated what you said. No, it's probably didn't fit or, there was a better quote that we could have used. Oftentimes people will call and tell me who should be on the cover for a month. And I'm like, they tell me, this person needs to be on the cover. Da, 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 they've done blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that's great. But next month is my music issue. Like, do they play, like, are they in a band? Like, it's not that this person isn't extraordinary. It's just, it's not going to fit, for this time.
Yeah. Okay, so let's do a hypothetical just to be safe on somebody who ends up becoming unsatisfied. And I'm coming from a place of where I'd like to maybe get a bit of your advice.
Yeah.
So the work all got put in, and at the end, they're no longer satisfied. What's your approach in that? Morally, where are you leaning? Are you like, man, all the work got done, this has to come out? Mm-hmm. Have you ever been in a position where you're like, they don't know what this could do for them?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And how do you navigate those?
I mean, if they really are insistent, I'm like, fine, let's pull it. I can put your competitor in there. Like, sorry. This, 1-page story of yours is 1 page and 124 that I'm responsible for this issue. Like you really have to kind of get perspective, and we never again want anyone to be unhappy, but they have to, work with us on expectations. Yeah. And if they are unhappy with the story, say that there's been times where, fact checking doesn't come back by the deadline and, I can't unring a bell or unprint a magazine where I'm like, hey, I sent you 2 or 3 emails asking, are there any edits? And you didn't get back to me. Yeah. There's always things that we can do to make nice, which is like, update the web article or, things like that so that people know that, of course you're not out to get somebody. Of course the work isn't lazy. We're people. There's communication errors, there's glitches in technology, there's, Mercury retrograde and every other factor in the universe. We have to be willing to work with people when things happen. And I think, if and when there are mistakes made, like owning up to them, being like, you know what, I missed that and I'm so sorry.
Um, if those situations ever came up and they kind of caught you off guard and you're like, dang, how can we prepare to not have this before? Do you guys ever consider providing like release forms beforehand? Is that ever been a thing that you felt like, maybe we should have this,
Maybe with cover, have them do, like, if it's someone huge, but not really, just because with the fact checking and stuff, we have such a method of like making sure, okay, we're going to spend hours doing this interview that, is building upon hours of research being done, spending a lot of time with you and, getting their phone numbers, their emails, Instagrams, and having so many methods of communication available to them. And, we always try to do our best product, and, we would never run anything that we wouldn't be proud of that was written about us. There have been, of course, times that Shelly's told me about where people have, really been upset. They get a beautiful spread, but it wasn't the cover, it wasn't enough, or, it could have been more, it could have been this, it could have been that. She's like, if I give you a gift and you don't like it, don't tell me, just don't use it. Like,
Yeah.
And it's, that simple. And, I understand that, these stories and these editorials are meaningful to people. Of course they are. But it's also a monthly magazine. It's not the only story. It's not the only issue.
Yeah. I get what you're saying. We've had our little hiccups before, and we've been trying to navigate those. Just like on the like, are we right? Like, are we? But when you say stuff like, we never have the wrong intention for anybody that we would put on. To kind of backtrack a little bit, is I understand the the direction of telling nothing but good news, but is there ever any important stories that might be more on the negative side that you feel that you've been, maybe this is one of those that the city has to cover? Or is this one of those things where it's pretty easy, like, it's just not our lane. Like, that's not what we're trying to do. That's for news.
Definitely.
Like this lifestyle, is there ever a story like that that's important that lives within lifestyle?
Oh, absolutely. We've had some really beautiful stories during Domestic Violence Awareness Month, for example, where it talks about survivors' journeys and how far they've come. It's not lost on us that women who are in abusive relationships, it usually takes 7 times to leave an abuser, and which is staggering, and that, just escaping and surviving is huge, but also moving forward. And so for us to be able to tell those stories is really, really impactful, and it helps people feel less alone. We had a story earlier this year about a gentleman who is self-made and does all of this really great work in sports statistics and journalism, and that's because he had a really bad experience because he was an addict, and he got into trouble, and had a very, very dark experience and really hard recovery. And it was something where I paused the interview and I said, hey, just reminding you, this is on the record. I would hate to include this in the story and you not be okay with it, or, misconstrue anything that might make you uncomfortable. He said, no, absolutely. I want people to know that I was addicted to meth and dealing and almost lost my life because I was subject to a very long prison sentence, and I was able to recover from that. And so it's things like that, when people are willing to be open with me about experiences like that that are so life-changing and so powerful, it's absolutely my responsibility to demonstrate why that is worth celebrating.
Let's take a little bit of a left turn.
Okay.
I think this past spring might have been the first one, but you have become a professor.
Yeah.
Was spring the first time?
It was.
How do we find ourselves in this position? And what has been this first year like? Because you're in the middle of your fall semester. How has this first year been going for you?
I love it. I didn't realize how much I would absolutely love it. And I had been getting the itch to go back to school. And my parents and my fiance were like, absolutely not. Like, no, no, like, no more degrees, no more Auschwitz, no more, like,
Auschwitz.
yeah, like, my mom was like, stop it. Don't you hate being cold in the, in the
Yeah.
misery? Like, just don't do this. Stop traumatizing yourself. And then, funny enough, I did a story for our women in business, or our women's issue, on Dr. Hilda Ontiveros from UTEP, who had won Scholar of the Year, this super, super prestigious award because of the work she does in UTEP's Women and Gender Studies. I interned there when I was a UTEP student, and it was just such an amazing program. I took a class on women working in the sex industry that completely changed my life and really helped kind of kickstart my social justice activism. And so I interviewed her, and I mean, you can tell I'm pretty chatty. I said, "What do you think about this? What do you think about that? What are we going to do with Roe v. Wade? And all these limitations to ban books in Texas." And so we just got to talking, and then she asked me a couple months later, just like Rolling Stone, like, "Well, would you want to teach a class or two?" Like, yes, like, are you kidding? And so I was like, yes, I can go back to school.
Yeah.
Like, oh. And so my first semester I taught gender and pop culture, which I'm also teaching now. And it's such a broad, topic. It's huge. Like, to me, I'm a TRL girl. Everything is pop culture. But to narrow it down, I really wanted to get to, what is a focal point of pop culture in terms of, entertainment and interest and problematic. And I'm like racking my brain. And then I'm just like, duh, the it girl. And so I call my class the anatomy of the it girl. And so what we do is we go from the Bard to Barbie. We start with Shakespeare's Cleopatra and analyze what it was that made Cleopatra both the historical figure and then Shakespeare's Cleopatra in Elizabethan England the iconic character she is today. What is it about her? And then we move forward to Clara Bow, the original It Girl in the movie It, and Daisy Buchanan and Zelda Fitzgerald and the Flappers, who were cutting their hair, drinking and smoking cigarettes. Moving forward to Joan Crawford, Marilyn Monroe, and the Starlets and the rise of media. And now we're working on my favorite, which are the 90s supermodels and the glossy magazines. We were just learning about Cindy Crawford and Kaya Gerber and, Linda Evangelista, Naomi Campbell, and, watching the problematic clips from America's Next Top Model and them really realizing the constraints and the pressures. And so right now what we're examining is what happens when the it girl cracks. So we just finished How to Murder Your Life by Kat Marnell, who is this amazing, amazing author and beauty writer and editor who had an extraordinary career, but she was really, really suffering. She was a sexual assault survivor. She was an addict. She had bulimia. She had depression. And she had access to a lot of money and a lot of ways to, sweep things under the rug. Going from there, we're going to be reading Gone Girl for a little bit of horror, and talking about Amazing Amy and the Cool Girl, and then eventually moving forward to Beyonce and Taylor Swift and Greta Gerwig's Barbie, and what that means.
In today's world, with a lot of the time, hold on, I'm gonna actually ask it better this time too.
Okay.
Your time in DC. Your time writing for different publications, you had focused on immigration.
Mm-hmm.
Today, are those still the social issues, or have they evolved? Have they grown? What is on the top of your mind right now that kind of drives you forward when it comes to still keeping that love for storytelling?
Mm-hmm. I'm so protective of this community that I like being the person to tell the stories. I mean, I grew up here. I understand the community in such a way that no one from out of town is going to understand. And I have the professional and academic experience, I think, to be able to do justice to these stories. So when I started covering social justice, particularly with immigration for Teen Vogue, I was challenged to, humanize what it is. And so I wrote this story about a student at UTEP who was the president of, it's called CAMP, the Campus Assistant Migrant Program. And it's for students who come from migrant farm working backgrounds, which more often than not, it's from undocumented immigrants. So this program helps the students integrate into the academic atmosphere and their parents. I mean, some of these parents don't know how to read. Some can't speak or read English. Most of, like, all of them have never been on a UTEP campus or, know how to do financial aid, that kind of stuff. So this program exists at UTEP to help these families navigate that. So the president of this program was this amazing student who was pre-med and was doing volunteer work all over the world, and trying to work his way up to go to medical school. And his mom was a housekeeper. And so as they're doing all of these things, they were also running an underground network of information to undocumented migrants, like, don't do it this way. Here's who you need to talk to. You need to get an immigration lawyer. You need to, go through these processes so that you don't get deported, so you don't get killed, so you don't get trafficked, which I thought was absolutely amazing. And so for me to be able to, take pictures of them and to talk to them, and then for them to be printed under, the Vogue masthead,
Yeah.
It was huge, like something so important. And then from there, doing explainers about what these policies mean, why they're important, what's fact, what is, kind of murky, and what people are getting confused upon. And because of my policy background, I've been really, successful at it. And then going off of that, things like women's rights, especially in Texas. I cover for Glamour often, when Roe v. Wade was repealed, and, when all these awful reproductive rights constraints were placed on women in Texas, what that meant for us and what it continues to mean. This year I've been doing a lot locally with animal nonprofits. So I'm real active with the El Paso Zoological Society and with
There's
Law
some
and
big stuff with the
Paws.
zoo, right? Isn't like where like funding or something was a big problem with the zoo?
Yes. So, sad there was this, 60-year relationship where the Zoological Society, which is a philanthropic foundation, worked hand in hand with the city, city of El Paso, this local government, to support the zoo and the animals, and be able to give them what they need. And
Yeah.
with that, if someone dies and says, all right, I'm leaving $1 million to the elephants, it has $1 million has to go to the elephants. And when that dissolution happened, there was, back and forth between where the fund's going to go, and the society, legally not being able to relinquish any funds without it going to where it was intended purpose. Imagine, someone in your family leaving their hard-earned money for something and it going to some unintended purpose.
Yeah. Man. Um, something sparked in me as a question as we were talking about this, and I see that there's like different points of focus for you. On a personal level, do you feel like you try to compartmentalize and turn switches on and off on when you're focusing on certain things, or do you try to blend them all together and kind of like have them all in harmony? Like, what works better for you in that sense?
I think it depends on how busy I am. I'm the sort of person, I love wrapping things up and tying pretty bows. So if I can make connections and, have some sort of like pretty presentation that helps, people or animals or all of the above, I love that. Or if I have, if it's something where I'm writing a grant for a nonprofit or a press release or whatever, that I compartmentalize, getting all the who, what, when, why, where, the fact checking stuff. Whereas if it's something more kind of like collaborative and creative, I have a lot more freedom and flexibility. Like, oh, maybe I can, get my friends from the news involved in helping this dog. And then I can get my friend who is a photographer to do a cute little photo shoot and send it to FitFam, that kind of sort of thing.
Yeah. What about on like on a personal level where it meets your professional life?
Oh, God, there's no like.
Do you know like, because one of the reoccurring things that I'll ask about here is not so much ask, but we'll talk about it, is the idea of like, going to work, going into your professional career for like 8 hours a day, and then, you're a whole different person. You come back and then, you're this person, and now you just turn the switches off. When it comes to your personal and professional life, I feel like I already know the answer, but where do you lean on that? Do you feel like you separate work from your personal life, or do you think that's a life of, boredom? That's a life of like the same thing all the time.
Yeah.
It ends up leading to a life of negative things, as opposed to work does bleed into your personal life, but everything works together. Everything's all like. Do you believe in that, or do you disagree with either of those two statements I just made?
I try to control it. I mean, I don't have the option of my work not bleeding into my personal life just because I feel like it's in my blood. And there are things where, breaking news happens and I get a call from the New York Times. It's like, oh, sorry, but this story is really, really important. You have to do this. You can deal with it later. But there have been times where my fiance and I have been on, a road trip and I'm working from my phone and I'm like, hey, sorry, you have to pull in the middle of nowhere to this McDonald's because I have to send this to my editor, and that kind of stuff is fun. It feels, romantic and, you're doing it. You're like on the grind and it's something that I love. And, these stories that I tell and that I develop, they mean so much to me. They can't not,
Yeah.
bleed into my life. Like after I cover something huge, if it's a news event, like it stays with me. Um, Back when I was doing broadcast news, covering, COVID, covering animal abuse, covering, January 6th, that was huge.
Hmm.
I got a call from Congresswoman Escobar from the basement of the Capitol who was like, you need to turn on your recorder right now because this is fucked up. And I was like, yes, ma'am. Like, okay. Like, what was I going to do? Oh, sorry, I don't start work till 1.
No, that'd be silly.
Imagine.
Man, let me ask you this then. You talked about how you almost, did research psychology. You contemplated it a bit.
I got done with all of the psychology classes and then I had to take the math classes. I was like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, I thought I was gonna be the president one day, and then I went and took my first political science class and saw how much I had to read,
Oh,
and I went straight to college of
yeah,
business.
you're like, nope.
Yeah.
And then, like, with research psychology, I'm so bad. Like, I'm a journalist. I'm not clinical. I would get in trouble for talking to my research
you had said that.
subjects.
You
And
had
I'm
said-
just
you
like,
had mentioned
whatever.
that.
They're people. Who cares? But you can't do that when it's hard science.
With microbiology as well, all these different things. You mentioned it. It's not something that I'm confused about. You've mentioned that journalism, it's in you. Um, but I guess like how difficult has it been to try to just like stay within that when there's this whole world of things that you just want to learn as somebody
Yeah.
who's as curious as you are. How have you been able to manage not getting straight off the path?
I think just being able to cultivate my interests a lot. I really love the writer Mary Roach. She used to write for National Geographic, and then she quit once she had been to Antarctica for like the 10th time. She's like, I'm, sick of this. So she built the latter half of her career about researching topics that she was really interested in and writing creative nonfiction about it. She has this one book. It's called Bonk. It's about the science of sexual physiology. So how the female orgasm was discovered, how Pyrex, like the kitchen stuff, they developed the first vibrators and speculums, things like that. She has another one called Spook, which is about the science of death, which
Bonk
is really
and spook.
yeah, it's like Bonk, Spook, a bunch of like other weird ones. She has one
What was spook about though? I'm so sorry. What were you about
it's
to say?
about death.
Okay, just
And
death in general, or is it covering?
yeah, and I think I'm not sure if it's the same one. It might be Spook, but I think it's a separate one. Oh, Stiff is about cadaveric research.
What is
about
that? What is it?
so about how they use dead bodies to do research, whether
Oh,
it be dead bodies as like crash dummies in cars,
Wow,
or
that's
at
weird.
the body farm in the South where they do like forensic research for the FBI, where they say, okay, this person was subject to this environment for this long, and they learn about like the decay and stuff like that.
Whoa. I mean, do we even need dead bodies as crash dummies no more? Considering we have like the materials to replicate like bodies, like pretty realistic.
You
now?
gotta know how like the juices flow. I
Oh
mean,
man, oh man, I'd rather just have like a crash dummy that's like made of like silicone or whatever.
right?
Man, I can't.
Crazy. Or like people who donate their bodies to science and do like the body's human, that kind of stuff.
Reading these things, I'd imagine it's desensitizes you. Uh, would you be inclined to like donate your body to science after?
Absolutely.
I was waiting for the not after.
Oh, absolutely. Totally.
Are you like an organ donor?
Yeah.
Or does that kind of defeat the purpose of?
Well, and that's the thing where like I would want to donate my body, and I'm just like, okay, just put me in a bucket and then turn me into glitter after, because most of them will have like ceremonies after where they like cremate the remains or whatever. Hunter S. Thompson got his remains turned into cannons. So he had like,
Oh, what?
yeah, silver, green, and blue smoke. So I'm like, I could totally get turned into like glitter or something, something cool, maybe a diamond.
That would be crazy. Whoa. Just on your neck.
Imagine someone's
Um.
tooth or something.
Oh man, that'd be wild. Just like one of these new age veneers.
Right?
So let's see here. We've covered a few things, but I do want to ask a little bit. I want to dive a little bit more into some city a bit on the logistical side of things. You guys work with advertisers, and one of our biggest goals is as a platform to receive funding. But chances are it'll be in the form of sponsorships, advertisements, maybe even grants.
Yeah.
What's been that like? What's that tricky rope of? Yes, we're working with advertisers, but at the same time, we believe in our own mission. And what does that push and pull look like?
It's a lot, of really stepping outside yourself, outside your ego, and thinking, okay, what's going to make everybody okay? We're not going to make everybody happy. And thinking about, is it more important for me to be right and to demonstrate, like, this is my point, like, I'm the expert, I'm the editor, or to make sure that this issue is successful, So you have to really think about those sorts of things, and then look for advertisers who align with your mission and your vision. Obviously your advertiser can't have like editorial say or, have the ability to like kill a story or place a story. Like,
You don't even open the door to that.
nope. Absolutely not. There's ways to do it. You can do that as an advertisement, sponsored content, things like that. But there will never be a time where I would let an advertiser tell me like you can or can't, run this or, I don't want you to do this story thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. It happens when I was in broadcast too, and it's a lot of money that people are dealing with, and you have to, think about, okay, these people, everyone's paychecks depend on these advertisers. So, how do we make sure that, the people with the money are happy so that we can continue to do our jobs and, maintain our livelihoods?
And what does the process look like of gaining advertisers? Like, do you guys have a in-depth pitch deck at this point, or is there a lot of credibility behind the name now that it's a lot simpler, more casual of a conversation, or is it just they come to you at this point?
It's a little bit of both. Shelly has an excellent sales training with the reps that I love going to, because she'll come in with figurines of like frogs and pigs and hogs and like they all mean something. So if you ever have a frog on your desk, that means that she found out that you fucked up and didn't tell her, and that you let this frog just like fester in your throat when you should have come and like asked her for help or like fessed up to it. And so you have to go like give her the frog back. And so it's about maintaining openness. Or you get a hog on your desk if you like stepped on another rep's foot and stole their client, and you're being selfish, that sort of thing. And so it's things like that that work. And it's also kind of like personal development, where you're when you phrase things like that, you're like, oh yeah, of course, it's helping me be a more considerate human being. So we do that. We have our media kit that explains
There you go.
demographics, prices, what, the bang for your buck, the difference between digital and print, and how we can put together different packages to complement each other, things like that.
Whose education is really like shining here? Because I feel like a lot of this is like strategic marketing at this point. So, this is not to say you don't know this, but with education being literature, journalism, like where does that skill set come into play? Like where do you learn this? Where does this understanding of it come into? Where, not to say you're a rep or anything like that, but I'm sure that you do have some sort of like assistance to reps if you ever need to come in and maybe close or anything like that. Like, where do these demographics of print versus media, who's helping you guys understand this, if not you?
I took entrepreneurial journalism at Georgetown, which really helped me kind of learn the business side of it.
Okay.
And then working with Shelly, she started at the Yellow Pages, back in the day, selling ads for that. And the reason she became successful at it is because she likes things pretty. she comes from a design background, so she was able to, get these advertisers and then meet a partner who had a magazine who would run editorial, and then she could do the ads, and then she's like, oh, I can do this myself.
Yeah. Do you guys use InDesign?
We do.
Oh,
Our
okay.
graphic designers do. I'm okay at it. In a pinch I can do it, but I like to let them do their thing.
Adobe.
Yes.
That's how they do it. Just wanted to know because we have it, but I guess we haven't had a need for it yet. I think I tried to make one newsletter in college, and I ended up just going to Photoshop and just, like turning all the layers in one group. And
it's scary. Yeah. I can do Canva Pro, but like InDesign.
Canva Pro, there we go. Wow. So, man, UTEP, the city. Are there any other projects that are taking up a good portion of like your focus? What else is like?
I know. I'm trying to think. No, right now, I'm working with students at UTEP. I'm the faculty advisor for, it's called WIM, Women in Media. And so it's the first of its kind student-run organization for young women students who are interested in all aspects of media, photography, editorial, graphic design. And so we meet once a week, and these girls are amazing. They have merch already. This is really cool. We're setting up guest speakers. They have a website, and so they're really creating their own little platform.
As a UTEP organization? That's cool that they have their own website,
Yeah,
too.
it's awesome.
Usually they'll have to see like utep.edu/
Oh, no, they have their own branding. Everything is pink, so of course I was in when they asked me about it.
Let's talk a little bit about the best of.
Yeah.
Do you just open the nominations not that long ago?
Voting, yes. Nominations were opened about a month ago for 2 weeks, and then we're right in the thick of voting.
How do you guys navigate that process? Do you guys just stay true to yourselves, or is there ever any awareness of like, I think some people might think this is just like, who's popularity contest?
Well, that's all it's totally what it is a popularity contest.
Yeah, of course.
That's how democracy works, is what I tell people when they call the complaint. I'm like, I hope you're this, concerned about your like government elections as you are, best burger.
Best burger.
Yeah, like I get it. But it's, always a bane of our existence. I try to stay as far away from the best of as I can. But it's a really interesting process, because what it is for nominations, you can nominate whoever you want, however many times you want. So we compile all of the nominations. Well, it's a company in San Antonio who does it, so we don't have any access to any of this stuff. So I couldn't fix it if I tried. So if there's mistakes, I can't fix it. So for example, when they sent us the raw data, people who were like a lawyer would nominate themselves for every category. So then we'd have to go on the back end and be like, that person's no. Like, remove all that stuff. Make sure, these companies are still in business, that sort of thing. And then from there, they get put onto the ballot. And so people can vote once a day per device. And then it gets counted and tabulated. And then they return the results. So we don't even know until they're delivered.
Whoa. Yeah,
it's scary.
Yeah,
people get really mad.
For sure. Yeah, that's why I wanted to touch on it for sure, because I know that I think some of the ones are usually like in a lot of the creative ones as well. Mm-hmm. Like, the best musician's always like a freaking dogfight in there.
It's all about campaigning. It's all it is what I tell people. My fiance won way before I started working at the magazine, and that's because I campaigned, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter at the time, doing little like reels and stuff like that, and just like putting it out there, and it worked.
Have you guys done any research on, especially for like business establishments, on like what winning the award might do for them? Like, does it translate to numbers?
Oh, definitely. They're able to put the badge, best of whatever, on all of their marketing stuff, and people put it, like Mendes Isaac Judy have it on every single billboard in town, which is cool to see. Yeah. People will frame it and put it in their restaurants, and it adds, a sense of legitimacy to their business, or, they can be proud, or, they can hand out the magazine and say, here's the best of, 2024. Look, I'm in here. Like, we made it. Like, here's our footprint.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I've seen, I don't know which restaurant it is, but they have like,
yeah, they have a ton. Pelicans has a ton.
It might have been ramen.
Ooh,
Do you guys have ramen?
ramen. I'm sure we do. There's 60 categories.
That's so
By the end of the
overwhelming.
best of, I will know every single winner in every single category.
When you guys plan that, is the best of party seen as one of the issue parties? Okay.
Yeah, so we combine, so with lifestyle magazines, they're 11 a year, combining December, January, because, people, from a sales side are recovering from the holidays, travel, stuff like that. And then it's kind of just slow
Yeah.
news wise. So we combine that and then have our best of event right at the end of January when people get over kind of the fatigue of the holidays and are ready to go out
Yeah.
again.
And then as far as I feel like you play a big role in building out the team of writers.
Yes.
How do writers work within the city? Are most of them permanent? Do most of them are just like kind of like on a freelance sort of thing? How does that usually work?
Yeah, they're freelance. We have a couple regular employees who, they'll do social media or graphic design or photography and also write. But I try to keep our pool as diverse as I can so that we can really celebrate all the diverse stories in El Paso. So I have some writers who are based, on the far east side who tell me about things I haven't heard of. I have some who are students at UTEP who are, tell me about things that are coming. And so it's really neat to see that, as well as seasoned writers who have been with Shelley, forever, who are, I don't want to say much older, but, at the, mid to end of their careers, where some of the younger writers are just getting started. So it's neat to see that and then see how they can really help each other and inspire one another.
Uh, Again, not to be pessimistic, not to ask a pessimistically directed question, but are there like pet peeves of young journalists that you want to like try to help them work through, that you feel like if they can overcome that, they would go so much further? Like, what do if any, what do those pet peeves look like?
I think it's things that I recognize that I had in myself, where it's like, don't be afraid to ask questions, or you don't have to be perfect. The first draft does not have to be perfect. Get it out. I'd much rather have a writer turn in a draft before deadline, than send me something after deadline that they, took apart 100 times and put back together, and it's a mess now because they got so in their head. And that's what I tell them. I'm like, I'm here to make you look good. And if you look bad, I look bad. I'm not going to let myself get embarrassed.
Yeah.
So just trust me, and, trying to take some of the pressure off and making it a fun experience. It's a lifestyle magazine. We're supposed to, have a certain brevity
Some
and
life.
levity. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. You can celebrate. I joke that the scariest people I've ever worked with are the fact checkers at Teen Vogue. That, like, they're not there to make you feel bad or anything. They're there to make sure no one gets sued. But it's such an experience of like, oh my God, am I an idiot? Like, how did I get assigned this in the first place? And you question yourself. And that's not anything that I ever want my writers to do. Like, obviously, the stakes aren't that high.
Yeah.
But I want them to be in a position to feel confident in everything that they turn into me.
So then, do you ever try to like maybe artificially raise the stakes in any sort of way?
No, they know, they like pleasing me. And I'm kind of, I'm such a big sister and just like a woo woo girl. Like, oh my God, I love this. I can't wait to see how you top this next month. And that kind of like
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
builds.
How let's talk a little bit about and maybe we could even end on this, but the idea of letting go of perfection. As when you were writing 5 to 6 stories a day, is it up to you to spell check? Are you gonna get in major trouble if there's
Yeah.
one typo? And today, like after all your experience, what is your perception on perfection? Is this something that you strive for ever? Is there room for it at any point, or is this something that like
Yeah.
no, just abandon that idea?
I try to think of perfection in terms of the Latin word where, not flawless, but complete. You
Ah.
know,
Okay.
if I try to make sure everything, there's no spacing errors, which I can't control. I don't do InDesign. I can't control whether the color models that the printer uses is correct, or if they're using the print color model or the website color model. And it's things like that where it's like relinquishing control and, kind of hoping that the universe has your back, but doing what I can to make sure we're in the best possible position for success. Like, mistakes are going to happen. I would much rather have a typo than like a factual error, of course. But at the end of the day, I want people to know that, we're trying.
Yeah.
Mistakes are going to happen. How often, do we make a mistake on a text message or, whatever? I think what matters is, owning up to the mistake and thinking like, oh, you know what, I'm really sorry. My first year under the magazine or as the editor, like, of course there was mistakes. I barely knew what I was doing. We were all learning what we were doing, especially after COVID and, thinking about what my practices were and, okay, how am I going to like create a safety net to make sure this doesn't happen or make sure that, there's a system in place to make sure that we are as, close to complete as I would like us to be.
Yeah. And then does this translate also, or do you sometimes lose sight of it within your personal life?
Yeah, totally. And that's something that I think about a lot. My whole ethos has always been treat people better than they expect, which is something that, of course you want, to treat people nicely, but I'll get so in my head about it where I feel like I disappoint people, and that's not healthy. You treat people well, you do what you can, but I shouldn't be, racking my brain because I couldn't, solve everybody's problems at the end of the day.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. That's a good way to say it. Yeah. You, I guess, would you say then like you're a big believer in like you gotta be good first before anybody else could be good on by your hands?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, that could be difficult sometimes, but it's one of those things that I think everybody's always trying to work through. The idea of perfection,
Yeah.
and always never being able to like make a mistake or there's no one to even say that that's a mistake when you couldn't solve everyone else's problem.
Yeah.
I do have something else that I was definitely thinking of, but you, I think, sit within the middle of a spectrum of up and coming creators, public figures, maybe new entrepreneurs, but then you also are very well connected to people who have been very established, can make things happen. Are you aware that like you're in the middle of this sort of spectrum, and like how do you try to take advantage of that by trying to be like, oh, I'll let you answer. I don't want to like try to assume anything.
I like just, like I said earlier, everyone has a seat at the table. Like, I like a party, like, how can we help, not only make things better, but make room for more
Yeah.
sort of thing. And I'm in such a great position where I get to see the best of people with my job, whether it be the CEOs of companies or nonprofits or, philanthropic events, and then align that with my students' interests at UTEP and help them like, hey, this person's studying this, you're looking for someone in a role with that, like, why don't you two connect
Be the
over
bridge.
coffee? Yeah. Something I'm so excited about right now is my intern Annabella, who's amazing, is really, really gifted when it comes to music writing and photography, and she's going to be photographing ACL this weekend, and it's going to be her first festival. She's going to be meeting up with Late Night Drive Home to get some cool shots for them, and it's huge. And I told her, like, yeah, I don't want this to just be like, oh, this is great, we're going to build on this. Like, let's create like an entrepreneurial project. So what I did is I connected her with one of my closest friends. Her name is Andy Ellaway. She's a photographer based in LA. She's on tour with Imagine Dragons right now as their professional photographer. She shoots the cover for Flaunt magazine all the time. She was very good friends with Virgil Abloh. She's just like everything you would want to be, as well as the nicest person you could ever wish to meet. So I connected the two of them. And so Andy's been gracious enough to be kind of like mentoring Annabella as she prepares for ACL. And they FaceTimed the other day, and Andy was on the bus, and she's like, oh, there's Dad, or, the members. And Annabella's like, holy shit, this could be me. Like, yeah, it definitely could. And so I know Andy's excited to have a little, kind of protege, and she offered to help her after, like, package her photos and figure out how to sell them to magazines and, big publications.
Yeah.
Which is, they don't teach you that in school. And, it's this, like, kind of girl power collaborative that, is taking over, which I'm so happy to be at the center of.
Oh, yeah. Those are always good. I have a couple of, like, experiences I think I can memorize where I'm like, oh, yeah, I made that happen. Like, I made that connection happen.
Oh, yeah. Or being like a matchmaker. I've always been
yeah,
like
for real hitch. Real hitch with it, for sure. Man, ERIN COULEHAN, y'all. Thank you so much, ERIN.
Thank you
That's a lot
for
of
having
insight,
me.
for sure. It's really good to learn a lot about, the goals of the City Magazine, the experience of being able to, share the interests and what you study to younger students, people that are like, going through their first round of education. It's really cool to learn all this, and especially knowing that you've had a journey through the big city, the rapid pace, all these things that are like the only reason, in my opinion, why you're able to go ahead and say I don't want any of like my team to feel that way is because like you felt the trials and tribulations
Yeah.
of like that fast paced,
Mhm.
rapid paced workflow, and I think it's really cool to see somebody who's learned these values and they want to try to help somebody understand them without maybe necessarily having to go through like the roughest patches versions of
Oh,
them.
totally. And like, I never want to be like, I'm older and I know better. But I'm like, well, I am and I do. Like, I just
I
want
did
this
this,
to
you have
be,
to do this
yeah,
too. It's
exactly. I'm
weird.
just like, oh, I just want this to be a little less painful for you, you know?
Because it ends up being less painful for you.
Yeah,
You approve.
exactly.
You probably find yourself approving more things on the fly,
Yeah.
trusting,
And
putting
then
more
it's
trust in the team.
healing, you know, like I learned from that because, you know, this person didn't make that mistake.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. We're really appreciative of everything that you've shared with us today. Erin, is there anything that you'd like to plug? Is there anything that you'd like to shout out yourself, maybe, or maybe the city? We'll put all the names in there anyway. But where can
Gosh.
people find you? Where can people find everything
I'm
that
all
you do?
over the internet. Instagram, Twitter, follow the magazine, read our stories. We're always having events. We have our lunch parties once a month that are free and open to the public. And so I encourage you all to come and say hi.
This one's gonna be out next week, but we're about to have a launch party tomorrow.
Yes.
State Line.
And it's our creatives issue, which is always really, really special.
That's a good one for sure, for sure. Um, this is a second opportunity for us to also thank you for featuring MF Pearl in the
Oh my
music issue
gosh,
as well.
thank you all.
honor
You all
for
do
sure.
so much great work. It's so cool. When I was in DC, I would go to Tiny Desk recordings all the
Oh,
time.
what? I
Yeah.
can't believe I didn't ask about NPR this whole time. What
Oh,
is that experience
You're
like?
gonna
What is a
hate
Tiny
me.
Desk concert like?
Oh my gosh, so fun. So because of my music reporting, I would run into Bob Boylan all the time.
The man.
So yeah, he's the best. So he and I would become buddies, and so we would like show hop together, and then go to Satellite, which is the dining, like little cute little diner attached to the 930 Club, and write our stories and share like bread pudding, you know, sort of thing. So he and I got very close, and I lived on North Capitol and E, and NPR is on North Capitol and K. So, and I also lived across from a bunch of hotels that the artists would stay at. So Bob would ask me to walk them from E to K Street. And so it would just be this like straight shot of a couple blocks, and I would meet them outside of their hotel, and you know, we'd have these like really beautiful, just like fleeting conversations about, you know, oh, how do you like DC? What do you do? Are you excited about this? And then go to the Tiny Desk recordings and see
Yeah.
them in action.
Man, that's so cool. I'm a little jealous of that, but I know one day I'll find myself in one, at least one
Oh,
Tiny
you'll
Desk
love
concert.
it.
It took me forever to realize that like, there was an audience there.
Yeah.
I mean, they clap at the end, but sometimes I think it was Tyler the Creators where
Mhm.
he really brought the audience into it.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I think they even like flipped the camera and
Mhm.
you finally see like
There's
what? There's like a
tons
whole
of people.
freaking
Yeah.
like the whole like audience there for sure.
And it's such a small space. It's
Yeah.
crazy. It literally is tiny.
It's Bob's. Well, they repurposed it to be
Mhm.
that at some point, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I do have one last question
Yeah.
because you had mentioned it when we were asking like where can people find you, uh, in like in like from your perspective, where do you find more value in social media? Do you find it more on the Twitter side, the X side, or on the Instagram side? Because for me, I actually do think I learned a lot more about my world
Mhm.
from Twitter.
Yeah.
But a lot of us just for some reason use Instagram as like the face of social
Mhm.
media,
Oh,
which rightfully
totally.
so. But if you're on Twitter, I mean, you'd argue, I don't think it's the face. So,
Yeah.
like, where do you think you pull the most insight and knowledge from? What keeps you the most in tuned?
I have the most engagement and I guess following on Instagram because people, you know, want to know what the magazine editor is doing, and I have really cute dogs who I think people enjoy. But I've always preferred Twitter, just like as a journalist, especially in DC. That's like
Mm-hmm.
what you do.
Yeah.
You know, is what it used to be. Where you get your news, where you connected with people, and then also as a journalist, Twitter was very legitimizing once you would get verified, because then you could reach out to sources and you could say, hey, you know, I'm not out to get you. I'm an established reporter with a legitimate organization.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's just
You can buy
so
the blue check.
oh, it's crazy.
MF Pro has a blue check.
Nice, look at you. And I think I treat it now more as I did like a live journal in high school, where I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna post things. You know, I don't really expect any sort of like traffic or engagement. Like let's see, is anyone going to read this? Is it,
Yeah.
So I guess there's less stakes now, which is unfortunate. I miss the good days of Twitter.
When it was Twitter.
So mad.
When
Yeah.
it was the bird.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to get a little extra nugget from that just to see what you thought about those two platforms. I mean, one could argue that there's another one that we don't know about, but to be honest, those are the powerhouses.
Well,
for sure.
and then I remember when like Threads came out.
Oh yeah.
And I thought like I barely like seeing what my Instagram people are doing. I don't want to know what they're thinking.
Yeah.
Not every noise in your head is a thought that needs to go out on the internet.
Yeah. Oh man. If somebody doesn't subscribe, one last little plug. If somebody can't subscribe or anything to the online, where can they possibly find the mags? Where they at?
You can ask nicely of me. But they can also find them at all local Walgreens.
Okay, for sure. One more time, Erin. Thank you so much.
Thank
We're in the HQ. We really appreciate it as always. Thank you once more, and we'll be seeing you tomorrow.
Yeah,
Stay
yay!
lined for
I'm
sure.
excited.
Yeah. Hey man, but that's how we do it over here at the HQ. Legends only in the building. Yes, sir. Good conversation only. Make sure that you guys keep showing love to the channel. If you guys go ahead and find the episodes on YouTube, make sure you guys subscribe, like it, share it, save it to a playlist. If you guys watch all of our episodes off of our website for some reason, thank you, because that stuff took forever to make. mfpearl.com. But of course, if you also find us on your favorite streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple Pod, Amazon Music, make sure you guys share it, save it, give it a rating. Whatever you guys can do to show love on those platforms, help us grow. And you know where to find us every Wednesday, man, at the HQ. That's what we do it. That's how we do it. Legends only. We'll catch you guys next week live at MFHQ. Yep.